Rodents are worth studying for their own sake, says my guest today, Ornella Bertrand. We've used them in studies for making human lives better and more comfortable, but we don't often pay attention to them for their own sake. Ornella studies the natural history of rodents, early mammals, and their brains at the Catalan Institute for Paleontology in Barcelona. She creates virtual endocasts, the void of a skull, which can be printed and shared as 3D models. She is currently investigating evolutionary changes in the brain and inner ear of arboreal and gliding mammals like flying squirrels and marsupials. We spoke in February 2024.
So are burrowing rodents more social than arboreal rodents?
Personality is something that is absolutely fascinating, but I will tell you right away, it's very difficult to estimate it in the fossil record. So, you might be able to find a bunch of fossils who died together. So, for example, dinosaurs, we can find huge area, like you would have, they would have fallen into a pit and they're all together and they were preserved at the same time. And you're like, okay, those animals must have been social. They all died together. That's a way with fossils you can kind of figure it out. For the stuff I do, so posterior rodents, some are, but not all. So you have those little rodents, like the naked mole rats, who are extremely social, who have a queen, and it's very interesting. I would say behavior that they have. But other fossorial rodents that we have, for example, the mountain beaver that lives in the northern part of the Pacific in North America. It's kind of solitary, kind of little weird little guy. If you see pictures that have long kind of nails, they're really funny. And so they're not super social, it seems. And so I don't know about the ancestors, if they were more or less social. And for squirrels, generally they're not like the squirrels that live in trees. They're not specifically social. I believe they're just kind of solitary lives, and they just meet for mating and things like that. But you do have, for example, rabbits, which are part of the squirrel family as well, who are very social and they live together. And also the prairie dogs.
The
prairie dogs. Yeah, the prairie dogs. Yeah, they also are very social. And so one of the things that I was trying to figure out in one of my paper was to see if the neocortex, which is one of the major part of the brain in mammals in general, where you have all the integration of senses that's happening there, like audition, vision, memorization, to see if, for example, they were bigger in animals that were social or animals that were arboreal. I'll try to kind of tease apart if I could see anything. And what I was maybe not expecting, but at the same time, I could see there was some kind of trend. So all living squirrels today, they have a very big neocortex. No matter if they're arboreal or pastoral, if they're social or not, they just have a very big neocortex. And from a paleontological perspective, I can't tell you more than that because I don't have access to the brain. So I can't tell which part of the brain of the neocortex is actually bigger. And so my hypothesis has been that, for example, you may acquire a large neocortex for one reason. And so for early squirrels, I think it was becoming arboreal and growing into trees. And that would then be the part of the neocortex related to vision that would have become bigger, because in trees you need a good vision to be able to jump from a branch to another. And then throughout time, for example, in mammals or prairie dogs who actually have also a big neocortex, I thought that maybe the big neocortex that the ancestors used to become arboreal and better at that, repurposed that big neocortex in another way to be used for social super sociality, to then be able to communicate better. So with studies that are made on modern rodents, for example, they show that some have actually a bigger prefrontal cortex, which is the area where you have more communication, interaction, that helps you to have interaction with others. And so I can't be sure of that. So my way of doing it is kind of like mixing what has been done on like, modern rodents based on actual brains and what I can hypothesize based on the fossil record.
And I was thinking, burrowing, you're kind of stuck together in a tunnel. Maybe they like have to figure out how to, be together. Whereas in the trees, you can kind of just leave and move away from animals. But that's, kind of maybe a speculative way of coming at it.
Yeah, I guess it's difficult because, there might not be an association like directly between, sociality and fossorial. Maybe like those squirrels, they became social after becoming more terrestrial and going on the ground. For example, the prairie dogs, it might not happen all at the same time, right? So you may have like an event and they become more fossorial first, and then they develop that sociality, or it's opposite. And I don't know for the naked wall rats exactly what the sequence of events. And the ancestors, if they're probably more terrestrial, I would think so. And so, yeah, it's an interesting question. There's like, posterity is linked to a high level of sociality. I don't know, like maybe some groups more, but in rodents, it's not always the case. Like it seems like they don't follow the same trends. Yeah, so I'm from France. I grew up in Champagne in the northern part of France. And then I did my master's in Montpellier on, it was paleontology, phylogeny, things like that, on dentition of rodents. So I started then looking at fossil rodents from Africa and Asia. And then that's when I moved from the European continent to go to North America for quite a long time. Like I did an internship at the AMNH in New York. And then I got a PhD offer in Canada. So then I moved to Canada. And yeah, my English, of course, got better throughout, like interacting with so many people from there. And once I finished my PhD, I moved with my now husband back to the US because it was just after my PhD. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So we moved to LA. And I taught a bit at a community college. And then I was like, actually, I want to do a postdoc. So we moved back to Toronto. And I did my first postdoc there. And then Steve Brissadi, that you talked to, I met him in New York before I started my PhD. So we knew each other for a long time. And he said like, oh, well, I'm doing a project on mammals. And I have this idea to do something on the brain evolution of mammals after the Cretaceous extinction. And so he asked me if I wanted to apply with him to this competitive, grant to do a postdoc, and I got it. And so in 2018, I think, I moved there in the UK, so I went back to Europe. And then I stayed 2 more years to do another project. So it was 4 years in Edinburgh. And after that, there was no permanent position there. So I continued to apply for postdocs, and I thought about Spain. I had like contacts here, and they have a grant that's really nice, 3 years. They can keep you, it's like a advanced, I would say, postdoctoral research position. I'm hoping to stay here because I really enjoy it here, and honestly, a little bit tired of moving around. But and imagine it's like, at some point you want to stop. So yeah, that's how I end up like doing this and kind of like.
So when you were in Los Angeles, did you ever visit the La Brea tar pits? And if you could take a time machine to one of the major fossil sites in its heyday, like the Karoo or the La Brea tar pits, where would you go and what would you look for?
The first one, yeah, I did go there. It was like the first thing I wanted to go to because it's really cool, and it's really not what I imagined when I really saw the tar pits. I was like, okay, that's actually what it is. It's like you can see fossils like coming out of there, pristine almost, like really nicely preserved stuff. And they found so much of it. I almost wanted to like jump into there, and do that kind of work, but there's so many people working on those things. And I think if I had to go back like to be honest, it would probably be like, at the day of the end Cretaceous extinction, because think about what happened that day. And when you think what was before and after, this is the kind of question that's absolutely fascinating for me to understand. For example, you have mammals living in trees before the extinction. They're like in the trees. So in North America, for example, there's the San Juan Basin in New Mexico where I did some field work. And I really you don't find a lot of fossils there because it's just right after the extinction. So there's just not many things who have survived. I think that's where probably if I could go back in time, kind of see what's there, who's the. But it's hard to tell because I would love to. I've been thinking about the time machine so many times, to just think, oh wow, if I could go back at that time and actually see, if what I'm thinking is actually correct, or if I'm just making things up.
Yeah, and I imagine when you look at an animal fossil, you can sort of reconstruct an image of what that animal looked like. How do you go about reconstructing a picture of what the forest looked like, or what the understory, how dense were branches packed together, and how did that affect the ecology and the mammals in those areas?
So I'm not a paleobotanist, but I know that sometimes in the San Juan Basin, for example, they manage to find really nicely preserved leaves, a lot of them. And so first of all, what you do is you identify what species do you have, right? Thanks to those leaves that you find. And then you kind of say, okay, this species should be related to some tropical species that we have today. Not even related, or they look very broad. So for example, really large leaves, very broad leaves would need a lot of rain and heat. So you would be, okay, that's probably a tropical environment. And if you have very thin, very small leaves, you're more maybe decidual, maybe drier, but temperate environment. And so sometimes you're lucky and you get both, the environment, and then you get fossils for which we can test hypotheses. But, you could have a forest and still have animals going around on the ground. And mostly you should have animals on the ground and in the trees. But it can be quite difficult to know, because if you think about it, so when you go around, you use your legs, your arm, that's what's in contact with the support. So we're going to look at postcranial bones to kind of see if the animal maybe was jumping, or if he moved a lot, he has a wrist that would go in different motions. So if your wrist has kind of a very wide range of motion, that would mean maybe you were arboreal, rather than running on the ground with a very I would say stable joint, a horse, or cows, for example. So you look at that, and a lot of time the postcrania is not preserved. And so when it's not preserved, you can try to use other indicators, such as the teeth with diet. You can kind of think, okay, this animal was eating a lot of fruits. Of course, they could have waited for the fruits to fall on the ground. But if it's really mainly bunodal teeth, which is rounded teeth, could have been also something that could have lived in trees, like primates, for example, early primates, the frugivores, and you can see that. And me, from my perspective with the brain evolution, I found there might be some aspect that could tell us that an animal may have been more agile or needed more vision to be able to jump in branches. I don't think you can just use the neurosensory system alone. I think postcrania is very important to kind of figure out where the animal was living. And of course, as I was saying earlier, the patio environment, so data plants and stuff can really help you to kind of build a picture of what you had.
For gliding mammals, which area of the brain, if it was damaged, do you think would make them worse at gliding and landing? I know in your research you talk about the flocculus and is it the parietal lobe? Is there any studies done of damaged of flying or gliding animals that have damage in their brain and then they're worse at?
That's a good question. I mean, so I don't know about damage brains and specifically gliding squirrels. But to understand sometimes the function of a part, what was done in the past is, for example, I think they still do it, but they would cut part of the brains and see how the animal would do. So for the Ravliculi or Petrolobials, that's what they did in macaques. And what happened is when you cut them, the eye doesn't focus anymore. So the eye just moved like, and it's pretty horrible. It's not something that I would want to work on. But so basically, like they have a very big role in like maintaining your eye position. And so when you're a squirrel, when you jump, when you're arboreal, not glider, it seems that it might be super important, especially if you go to a branch that's very thin. You might want to have a very good sense, like your eye might want to have want to have a good control of your eye movement, so you can really quickly like adjust to get that branch. Gliding squirrels are really interesting, and they really made my life complicated. And they continue to be, because I have started to gather more data on gliding mammals, but I'm not quite yet there, because it's my project here to like expand to gliding mammals beyond gliding squirrels and see if there is similarity between the brains of gliding marsupials, other gliding rodents. And it seems like, as you were saying to me, like, so gliding squirrels seems to have smaller petrolobials, smaller, like this part of the sabula. So one of the reasons that could happen is because you just like don't have space so much in your brain, so those parts are still there. It's just like because this animal are gliding, they have a different mode of locomotion and they're more aerodynamic. You need to like, it's not you jumping onto a thin branch, you're jumping onto a trunk. So you just have to like just go straight ahead. And so the speed is important, of course, because you don't want to, you're not really flying, right? You're like just like trying to not fall. Mm-hmm. And so this change in the mode of locomotion from arboreal to glider probably changes things in the brain in terms of like maybe the vision is not as important as it is in arboreal squirrels. For example, most gliders are nocturnal, actually. So when you're nocturnal, you don't need that much vision. Actually, hearing is probably more important. And some are really big like boa. And that's one thing that I want to look at. For example, gliders do have better audition. Looking at the cochlea of the inner ear, for example, to see if there is, for example, an opposite trend, less vision and more audition kind of happening compared to the closest relatives. So I think that could be linked to that kind of aspect in the brain that would, in the inner ear, that would change audition and vision.
Okay, right. You also wrote about how sometimes evolution rewinds brain structures when they become less useful. How common is that sort of reversal of brain capacity? Is it kind of the rule that things tend to get smarter except in rare cases, or is that more common that they lose brain function or lose brain size?
I think more and more we're going to study, more and more it's going to be clear it's more common. And the idea of like, that's something I'm really trying to spread. So I'm glad you asked me that question. It's always the idea, oh yeah, we're becoming smarter and smarter. But actually, like, you live in a specific environment in which you need to adapt. And depending on the environment, it might not be like the solution having the biggest brain of all, because having a very big brain is extremely metabolically expensive. So it just costs so much, and as humans, as you know, we eat like so many times per day. We need to sleep so much. We need to take care of our big brain. And so it has this advantage. And in our society, it really had, we found a way we adapted to our environment. But for example, the mountain beaver is a good example. As I was talking in my paper, is that this animal lives underground. It doesn't really need so much vision. And so if it doesn't need to have such a big brain to be able to live his life, why? Why would you have such a part of your brain that's consuming so much energy if you're not using it? So it might be some kind of selection that is like, reduce the size of the optic nerve, reduce the size of the eyes, and the brain. Also, this part of the brain also reduces. it seems like it's almost like normal for another part of the body to change. For the brain, we always say, no, it's different. But it's the same. It's like, it's an organ like the rest of your body. So it will adapt to the environment where it is, basically.
Do you include other animals when you use the word environment? And also how ice ages over the past 3 million years affected environmental complexity?
And the ice age, you said?
Do the ice ages reduce complexity, or the fact that there's freezing and melting and it's always changing, is that like more complex to your mind?
So it's I had this question before, like, would I consider the interaction among species? And of course they have an influence on like why animals decide to go in the trees, and why animals decide to go on the ground. Maybe because in the trees it's thickened already. So the main example I would say is like dinosaur and mammals before the Cretaceous extinction. Dinosaurs have like are so massive, they have all those niches they occupy, and mammals are like, all right, well, I'm not gonna go above 15 kilos because there's no space for me. And then after the extinction, well, they're not here, all those giants are gone. And so the body mass actually of mammals start to like skyrocket so much that the brain looks smaller, but the brain also increases because you need a bigger brain to maintain a bigger body. That's kind of like a law. If you have a bigger body, you need a bigger brain. But it seems like the brain just stagnates and doesn't go beyond and beyond. It's just like the body size increased so much because there's all this space. It's a very unusual time, obviously, because usually it's very progressive. So the Cretaceous extinction is really a very case. But it's to tell you, like, if there's no species that are around, then you have space to like do kind of what you want. In North America, for example, primates were around for a long time until like the Oligocene, so until about 33 million years ago. And then they went extinct. There was a big change in the environment. It became cooler. And so primates at the time didn't like that. They just wanted tropical environment. And so now they're mostly in Africa. Of course, they're in South America, but that's later. And so what replaced them was squirrels. Squirrels came around and they began to go in the trees, and it probably influenced actually their brain size changes because they had the opportunity to go in the trees while primates were not there anymore. So they took over that niche. So yeah, definitely. I mean, the environment, I think, has a big impact. I think, and also interaction with other species. How direct it is, it's difficult to say. Is it probably indirect? There's probably like things in between. And the ice age is a very cool question. I mean, there's been a paper that came out and maybe a couple of years ago, and they did just relative brain size. So very, very much like simple. They just look at how big the brain is. I mean, simple. It's just very hard. You need to get a lot of data. And what they found was that the megafauna who disappeared actually had like a relatively smaller brain. And that the mammals who survived, like, the modern wolves and rhinos and like elephants and all of those, they had a bigger relative brain size. But they say it wasn't related to the fact like it was already starting before the extinction. So it was interesting, and I was thinking like I think we need to have more data probably and to know exactly what part of the brain is actually changing. But the ice age, I think, definitely had a huge effect because if a part of the population go extinct, obviously you're going to have other population you're going to take over. And also, I mean, I think more about what happened during the Eocene, because during the Eocene, I think one reason why primates, rodents made it through and those other that were before didn't was because they were able to like adapt really well. And I think it was because of their relatively complex brains. Yeah, I know, like, for the Ice Age, I think more work needs to be done, and that's really something I'll definitely, like, continue to look at. We just need more data, and the skulls are usually really big. More you move through time, more animals get big. And, but the CT scanner that we use are not becoming, I mean, you can have big CT scanners, They cost more money, and sometimes it's kind of difficult to move big specimens. Like, you know, you have to ask the museum to say, hey, can I borrow your giant rhino? And they'll be like, all right, like, how are you going to carry it? You know, but if I want to scan the little rodent, it's like, okay, I put it in my pocket or in my bag and I'm going to the micro CT scanner. It's easy, but I think for the Ice Age, there's like a huge amount of open field like to do. It's just, I'm starting to try to scan big stuff, but yeah, it costs more money.
Yeah, let me ask, how is like 3D modeling and printing changing your field of study? Like, what kind of reaction do people have when they hold the models, and what kind of reaction do you have being able to hold different models and see the little physical, you know, all those specimens right there? Does it make it easier to share, and does it make it easier to study locomotion?
Yeah, I mean, I think it does. When I get to print them, like I don't print them very often, but for sure, when you want to show to the general public or other people that are not familiar with them, it can be really amazing. I mean, this changed like our field like so much. Like I was able to test hypotheses that were done in the 70s on like not even like endocasts. It was like they were using water displacement, like things like techniques that are that today we wouldn't use because we can actually like segment virtually all those endocasts. So it has been a huge game changer. And I even had a professor one time who emailed me and said like, oh my God, like I can't believe like you got a virtual endocast of this fossil. So it was like a fossil that was described for the first time in 1910. It was really cool. It was an emblematic rodent, Panis, which is one of the oldest like known rodent. And yeah, it was very genuine email from this older professor, and it made me feel very good. You know, it was just like it was just so exciting because people have been wanting to look in there, but when you have a unique fossil, you just don't want to touch it. Like, you know, you don't want to start breaking it to see how the mold look like, because for sometimes, like if they have a lot of specimens, that's what they would do. They would like take the fossil and actually break it to like look at what the endocast look like. So it's sad, but that was the first step of paleontology. You know, it's like it's doing that kind of stuff, and I'm so glad we don't have to do this anymore. And at the same time, you can get access to, yeah, it's always amazing. You know, you start segmenting, and I always like felt like, oh, I don't know what it's going to look like. And the more you do it, and you look, and it's kind of like a new fossil on its own. You know, it's like the discovery of something new, but not from the field work, from like on a computer. Like it's a very interesting development of paleontology to have access to that. And one thing that can be very good when you have the 3D models in your hands is that you can touch the surface, and sometimes you can feel like deformation or things on the endocast that you might not be able to completely grasp on the screen.
All right. One question I wanted to ask was, I have a recurring dream where I'm being chased by a velociraptor that can like jump and glide 100 feet. Do you think that's a genetic memory, or is that just my imagination?
I know dreams. And I've actually had I did an expose or a presentation when I was in undergrad about dreams because I was really interested actually into this. I was really into it, and make lucid dreams in which like you can control what you're doing to a certain extent, because otherwise you actually you actually wake up. So unfortunately, I don't think so. I don't know, because it's very interesting. Our dreams actually like remnants of like our ancestors, like deep ancestor, mammalian ancestors that were doing like crazy stuff in the trees and be chasing by dinosaurs. I don't know. I mean, why not? It's hard to actually like tell you like, no, it's not possible, because who knows?
How have predators of rodents adapted their locomotion to be effective hunters? Like, are they more or less doing the same things they were doing 10 million years ago?
You know, you made me think when you told me about predators of rodents. I just thought, like, I saw a video recently on TikTok, really cool, of this fox, this Arctic fox. I mean, they live in the snow, and they use the magnetic field apparently to be able to catch rodents under the snow. And you need, of course, a complete silence. So shows you that wild animals need us to be away and very far away, because sometimes it prevents them from actually hunting. And those fox get their prey 75% of the time, which is like good, but not like, and 75%, like if you have a bit of noise, like it's over. And so they would jump like this and like literally fall on it, and they come out of the snow. So they have like in the snow, like the entire body is in there, and they come out with like a rodent in their mouths. And the question is like, those like foxes, those behaviors, did they existed 30, 40 million years ago? What we do usually is looking at like bones, obviously, and look like, hey, did they have the same adaptation? Were they able to do that behavior? And then we make some, hypotheses. Well, if they had kind of like morphological adaptations, which is like, the way like they are morphologically similar to modern foxes, then you could make the hypothesis that they would have maybe, and I say maybe because sometimes you may have a morphology and you might not use it the same way. It's very tricky. For example, have you heard of like goats that go in trees and they actually like...
Yes, they crawl and they walk on the branches.
Yeah. So if you're looking at like this behavior is weird for us because we're like, wait a second, like they're not adapted to go in trees, but they're able to do it. So it is a bit of an anomaly, but it's really an anomaly, and sometimes when we look at like postcranial adaptation, I'll be like, this animal is made just to be on the ground and run. But then you see something weird like this, and you're like, why are you doing in the tree? Like, you're damaging my hypothesis. Like, you shouldn't be able to do this. So that's sometimes what you're faced with when you're a paleontologist. But the best thing you can do is look at what modern mammals are doing, looking at videos like I do, I love doing this because it helps me to give me ideas of like, okay, if they're able to do that, that would be fun to imagine if they were actually be able to do this in the past. And so carnivores, primates, and whales are the three groups that really increase their brain size really fast. So carnivores, it's difficult to know if they had the exact same behavior. I think it would really depend on the behavior of their prey. So you would have to see like, do rodents actually behave the same way? I think most likely they probably had similar hunting strategies. But what's interesting is, I don't know if you heard that hypothesis of like this like arms race between herbivores and carnivores. What's happening is like herbivores like horses, cows, like those animals, they also have an increase in brain size through time, as carnivores have it. So it feels like carnivore gets smarter to try to get their prey, but the herbivores have to get smarter too, like at least a little bit, to be able to like escape the predator. And it seems like very congruent, like it seems through time, like they both like kind of follow each other and increase in size. That's the hypothesis. This is like some kind of like arm race, like at least in the Wonderland, like, it's just like keep going, to kind of like be able to survive. And for me, it's a good opportunity. Some people say, well, they live in groups, so that allows them to, to escape if they can. But you can't take away the fact that they have very big brain. Like horses have a pretty with a lot of circulation, very complex brains. And so for me, it could be linked to actually like avoiding predator from having the predator becoming smarter to try to catch the prey. And so, I can see an evolution in the change of behavior, but somehow I would expect it to be a little bit similar.
Okay. Good. I got the impression from your research that you had studied gliders a little bit, but based on what you said earlier, it sounds like that's more of a new avenue of research for you. But my question was, how quickly can a glider learn to glide, like when it's a baby? Is the learning process similar to like a baby bird that just kind of jumps out of the nest and figures it out after a little bit of trial and error? Or do they figure it out faster? Do they learn by watching adults, perhaps?
So I don't know, but I'd like to speculate about this. The idea of comparing with like birds and maybe bats actually is a good idea, because bats are mammals. And so, I mean, in bats, the difference is like they live upside down, and they probably do it a bit differently. I would expect like any other mammals, you would have a trial and error, and how quickly they would learn, it's difficult to say, because you have, for example, deers, or like, deers or horses, let's say. Deers is a good example. They go up, they come out of the womb, and they almost walk instantly, like it goes very quick. And they have to do it because they could get caught like by predators. So very quickly they know how to walk. I think squirrels are a bit different, because flying squirrels specifically, their ancestors is with tree squirrels. They live in like the tree inside. I forgot how it's called. Like
Hollow.
So like that's the hollow, the hole of a tree, and they stay there probably for quite a long time until they have hair, until like they can come out. And I can imagine it's probably trial and error. It's very weird, the mode of locomotion of gliders, and also because they don't really like jump. I mean, they jump, but they just do nothing else. They just like glide. So they're very different from actual like active arboreal rodents, where they're like jumping. I don't know if you've seen like a squirrel. Like one time I saw one, like she was gonna fold up that branch. She was just holding it like this, and it's so thin. It's like, no, it's fine, just climbing back up and like jumping in a distance that's actually quite impressive. Almost, I would say, probably not as far as a glider, but like the distance they can go it's quite cool. And I think also, so you have a difference between small gliders and large gliders, and I think the large one, of course, can go much further away. But I would say like probably trial and error. But I don't know. I haven't like looked at papers.
Sure. I just, for like a fun tip, I was looking up what's the fastest that a bird learns, and it's the fulmar, it's called, and it lives on the cliffs. And it, like, one day it just jumps out of the nest, and it has to learn it has about 10 seconds when it falls to, it either flies or dies. And so I don't think gliders are doing it that fast. 10 seconds.
Yeah, that's very cool. Wow, that's crazy. And with the winds, that can help, I guess. Like,
I thought it was really funny that like rats and mice were studied in labs for a long time, and nobody knew that they were communicating with ultrasonic sound and like ground vibrations. I'm curious, how complex do you think their language is compared to other intelligent species like maybe dolphins or crows?
Speaking of what you said, actually, like we think that gliders might possibly do echolocation or like some form of it.
Wow.
So there's a paper or two that came out, and this is still really early to be sure, because you need, as you mentioned, record a lot of like time to see if you can catch this kind of sound. There's so much we don't know, I think, about those animals, because especially mice and rats, because they're not studied for that reason, right? They're studied for like helping like humans to survive, or like, to test for disease and things like that. They have been rarely studied for their own sake, for their own understanding of like, why are they like this? And that's why I love paleontology and doing what I'm doing, because I'm not doing in the goal of understanding like how humans evolve, or like how we evolve. Like I care about what they then like different from us actually, or like or maybe similar to us, because some people say, oh yeah, imagine cats can communicate like doing some kind of anthropomorphization, like you're thinking like they like us. And I'm like, well, if you look at their brain, they're actually really similar. And all placental mammals have like the same structures of the brain, exactly the same. It's just some maybe less developed than others, but we all have a common ancestor. And our common ancestor has like the same part of the brain. And it wouldn't be surprising that they can communicate, because we can. And so rodents, it's a bit difficult to know how much they're communicating, because you would have to make them talk to us. Like, you have to, like, I say that you have to really think of like asking the right question. So have you seen those videos on TikTok, or the platforms of like people having their cats with their dogs with like little like buttons that they press?
Yes, absolutely.
And like these like words on those buttons. And I mean, I love this because they just vindicate my part of like, stop thinking animals are different from us. Like, we are animals, we're part of the animal kingdom, and just ask them the right question and they're going to answer to you. If you ask the right way, for example, if I speak to you in French, not going to understand what I'm saying if you haven't studied, or I'm not going to understand someone speaking Chinese. It's not my language, so I might be very confused. I might not use correct like body language. It's just being able to understand each other can go beyond humans. And I think with whales, for example, where you make the right experiments and you kind of like ask the right questions, because I think this is the thing is you need to like you only can find what you know where you're looking for. So that's the problem, because not percent anyone knows. You need to kind of like ask the questions in a way that you're like, okay, I want to find out this. Does this make sense? But maybe not asking the right question. And I think for rats, and we need just to like look at how they might be communicating maybe different. We are used to maybe there's different channels. I don't know how that. I think that would be probably almost the same. What I always say is that if I put you in the skin of a squirrel in trees today, if I make you a squirrel, whether you mind and brain, you will be probably the worst squirrel ever, and you probably die very quickly because you just not adapted to this world, right? But you would just be the worst, and all the other squirrel would look at you like, "What the hell are you doing?" Like, and you need to get your food, right? Like, and so we never do that. We always do the opposite of like being like, "Oh, of course, like so stupid." So like, put you in the shoes of our squirrel, you will look very, very dumb, and not understand, how other squirrels are communicating with you. You'll be like, I don't know what to say. So one of the things I would love to see more is, I really like this thing what they do with domesticated animals like cats and dogs, to kind of like starting to manage to communicate with them, because I just feel like they are so smart, probably like in a ways we don't know, and they probably observe us and look at us, and I don't know if they're able to judge us. But from some of the videos I've seen of the cats, it seems like sometimes they actually like reply things of like, but of course those are not like experimental and controlled and published literature, but I think there's a big potential in kind of like revisiting how we see other species, mind. And I'm eager really to see that.
I think John Bianchi was the guy who had this border collie named Chaser, and he taught it like 300 words, but it also kind of learned like some grammar structures and like go get the bigger toy or go get the red thing. So yeah, I think those are awesome. I know we're coming up at our time. Do you have time for one more question?
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
All right. So if humans disappeared, how would you rate the odds of rodents rising to build a planet scale civilization? Do you think that they would become or could become predators, and could they become bipedal?
Wow. So first of all, I think anything is possible. In the light of evolution, it really depends of like what's around what other animals are around. I think humans became what they are because of circumstances around, probably species that were around them, the climate that was very specific. I don't know if if another, like for me, what humans did is what humans did. If like another species was to rise, I don't know if they would become like human, because specific question. If you were rewinding the history of the planet, there was a famous scientist, Old, who had and I agree so much with him. It's like it would be completely different. There's so much random stuff into evolution that happen, interaction between organisms that are, and like for example, plants and like going with like a mitochondria and like creating an animal, like things that we were like, why did they decide to symbiose together and make like different things? So what happened to humans? I don't know if it would happen to rodents. It could be. Maybe there's some kind of trend that lead to this. But when you think about that, you can think about life outside of Earth. And some people have been like, oh, there would be aliens like that have our technology but better. And I'm like, why do you always think that it's going to be like us? If there's no way it could be completely different, and it likely would be. They might not have legs. They might not, like the fact we have legs, the fact we have eyes, and the way we organize, it's really due to million and million years of evolution from an ancestor and, a wrong asteroid, as we know, a wrong timing history where some animals spread out more than others, and then you change the cards, you change completely what's happening. So I think if humans were going to disappear, they wouldn't leave such a big hole in the planet. I'm one of the people who think of course, there's so much humanity. We're just not destroying ourselves, but of course the planet. And I think we should be more humble and try to protect it because, we would miss the planet. If it disappears, we would miss so much, and it would probably it would be the end of us. But if we disappear, I don't think the planet would miss us. We actually part of this planet, and we have taken this role we shouldn't take. We should be part of this ecosystem, be with it, and protect it, because it's all some kind of I would say beautiful web of interaction that's happening. And so I think the planet would be all right.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know if you would, the civilization.
Yeah, it's something I love to think about, but I don't know ants or octopuses or mice if they would rise to that level, or if it would kind of be like it used to be where everything's kind of in balance.
Yeah. I mean, for humans, it's just very weird. We have such a large brain compared to even the other primates. We're just an anomaly. It's just very, very weird the way we became such a big brain, because also it's so expensive to maintain. All our bodies modified to accommodate with this big brain. The fact we're bipedal, it's a lot of things. And to be fair, whales and carnivores also have relatively large brains. They find a way to communicate. We just have a way of reproducing that so quick, and we just found a way to do it. When you think about the first hominids, Australopithecus, or those were just living other species. But I think when we started to do, it was probably agriculture that kind of when we started to settle, things like that. But if you still think about the nomadic lifestyle, for example, when you don't have a lot of descendants, you just minimize your group size, we could just be, of course, it wouldn't be civilization and all the things we have today, but we only have all the things we have today because we billions of people. So you need to do something with that very huge quantity of humans. So I always think of humans as being weird. That's how I see it. It's funny, and not the rest.
Yeah, me too. I feel the same way. I feel like that's a good place to wrap up too. So, Ornella Bertrand, thank you so much for your time. Yeah, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Okay, bye. Have a good day.
Ornella Bertrand's latest paper is titled How Smart Was T-Rex? And previously, Brain Evolution in Fossil Rodents. Her virtual endocasts, or 3D brain models, are posted on a website called Morphosource. So if you have access to a 3D printer and you want to print out a squirrel brain, you might take a look there. Links to her papers and footnotes from our discussion are available on the newsletter post for this podcast episode at ryanblakely.net. Thank you for listening.